Hello YouTube, this is Ben Gessel. How's it going? This is one of those late night videos. And I am going to do a review of Wizardry 8. A bit more in-depth review of that video game. As well as ask you guys a question that it'd be good to hear back some responses regarding. So first, the review. So, and I'm feeling pretty good tonight anyway, but review. So, on Steam, they had a great deal. You can get 3 video games for like just $4. It actually was a great deal. But of course, the other 2 games, Wizardry 6 and 7, are pretty old and retro and kind of clunky. Yeah, so I'm kind of just going off Wizardry 8 here. It was still a great deal, I think, for what I paid. Very much so. Wizardry 8 is a pretty big game, geographically. That's really great right there. But I suppose some of this, what I'm going to mention, is not so big of a deal for some gamers, but for me it is. And I'm sure I've mentioned what I'm going to say already a little bit in another video, but I'm going to go in a lot more depth with this guy. So honestly, it's been over a few weeks since I played the game, and I've gotten pretty far. I would like to go farther. And I've enjoyed other games, more particularly, I think, Divinity Original Sin a bit more. So I'm coming to see that, yes, if you want a great video game, you're going to have to pay a bit of money for it. Unless it's very old and has held up well over time. And also is something that kind of matches your personality pretty well, too. Some people being, like myself, more picky than others about those things. So, and of course you get pickier as you get older in general. So, yeah. Wizardry 8. I understand that it had a little budget issue at some point. So that was one of the things that played into maybe some people's thoughts of why it could be a little bit better in places. The thing is that, of course, it doesn't hold your hand. You know, kind of need to figure out a lot of stuff on your own. But it really, because of the nature of the combat thing, where it's turn-based, and that you have little things that your people say, right? They're programmed to say, and how many times you find yourself in combat with enemies that respawn. Yeah, it's a little bit like playing Morrowind or Oblivion. I'm sure Skyrim's similar. It's a little bit like one of those games, but even more annoying because you, in the case of Wizardry 8, keep hearing the same stuff over and over and over again. Now, when you're playing Baldur's Gate 1 or 2, for instance, there's a little bit more variety in what people say. Maybe a little bit more personality as well. Maybe not that much, but it still kind of works a little bit better. In Wizardry 8, really, I mean, there's something that these people say over and over and over again. And instead of it being, again, fun or forgettable, however you want to think about these recurring dialogues, that are really short during battles and things, it really, instead of something like that, it becomes something a little bit more, particularly with some of the female voices, it becomes something kind of, I'm not sure, but it sounded almost like they're trying to, the women that were voicing female characters sometimes, it sounds a bit like they were going for a younger demographic with this game. A little bit of a cutesy thing, but almost like, oh, how can I put this? I mean, they're really trying to make this game, Wizardry 8, acceptable for families and people that didn't want to have to deal with characters like prostitutes. So I tried. So they kept it pretty clean that way. But again, with some of these recurring little lines and dialogues, I'm sure that they had to budget to deal with, and they had to deal with stuff, You had to pay your people, so you can only have so much that they could say a certain period of time, and you have retakes and all this stuff. Maybe they didn't have as big of a budget as Baldur's Gate. We all understand that, but the cutesy factor with the female the female voices, depending on again what female voice you choose, it's there. The other guys I picked, male voices, they're fine. They can be a little bit humorous, but maybe in almost a slightly stock character way, depending on what it is you're going for. But I thought they did a great job with the Scottish accent, by the way. So if you get a tough dwarf or some other guy that has a lower voice, that Scottish voice, it actually works a little bit better, I think. Anyway, so that's just, the game, again, is, as I mentioned, is very big. But you spend a lot of time on combat. I mean, just a lot of time. It's maybe not as much time as you would spend in combat with a Dungeons & Dragons board game. But I suppose you're eating by part of the time that you're playing the game anyway, and you're socializing, and so it's probably not as tedious as Wizardry 8, but it's just, you just whack, 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 and you're fighting these little vines, and or bandits or something, and it just takes an hour, and you're just like, let's get this over with, and you keep trying to, so it's kind of a drag, but it's not too bad, really. I mean, it's really taxing and frustrating for a while, I imagine, until you get more powerful. But if you get more powerful, I'm wondering, it's like that, you keep whacking the crows in Morrowind, or you keep whatever, it's just, games aren't supposed to be annoying, they're supposed to be fun. If it's something like a fantasy adventure video game where you have some combat and things like that, it's very repetitive, and so at a certain point you just start avoiding enemies, not because they're too powerful, but because you just are like, let's get to the good stuff, let's get to the interesting characters, or the interesting puzzles, or the interesting whatever. Now, at the very first area of the game, and really there is a overall plot, it's an overarching quest, but it's kind of like the Elder Scrolls, where it's not really a very, okay, I don't want to use the word epic, but it's the word is so overused, but it's kind of, it's not a main quest that is very memorable. So, I mean, for me, it does kind of detract a bit from wanting to play the game to its end. But, still kind of works. I mean, kind of like a why not thing, kind of thing. But it's almost laughable, kind of how the main antagonist talks to the main character. I mean, again, I'm sure there's budget issues why this was the case, but the main antagonist, I know this is kind of a bit spoilerish, but I don't know if you want to play this, but the main character, the main antagonist, is a little bit, again, I'm thinking of something a little bit juvenile in nature and a little bit nerdy, which is, again, unique. It's nice to have a antagonist that's a bit more brainy, perhaps, or a bit more, I don't know, robotic or something, but instead of the dragon or the wizard, evil wizard, but it's makes it more of a comedy when the antagonist is that way. He can be extremely powerful for all I know, but he's just not very convincing as a antagonist. I think I mentioned something like that in the earlier review of Wizardry 8, but it's, yeah. So there are puzzles, but you kind of have to really look for them. And it's so open-ended at a certain point that you could literally just kind of do what you wanted to do, but not really. There's some places that are a little bit trickier. So you kind of want to know in general where to go. It's a little bit tougher to figure that out, certainly than Baldur's Gate 1, for instance. Where Baldur's Gate 1 kind of gave you some different directions, mainly north or south along the main north-south road in the middle of the map, but this game is kind of gives you probably even more options. But again, there's places that you could wander into very easily, kind of too early in the game, kind of a little bit. So I don't know. It's hard to. I'm not trying to rag on the programmers at this point. It's not their fault, of course. It's just I don't know, just the way these things go. But yeah, like I say, it's been a little bit since I played this game. I don't know. I'll just play it when I have time, or have the energy, or the interest, really, to finish the game, or get farther in the game. I have been quite a ways into the game, like I say. I've explored and finished already probably at least a handful of areas, if not, kind of seen a few more places. The gameplay itself takes a little bit of getting used to, at least on a Mac, but it depends on the game system, of course, a little bit. But it's not too hard. Get into the main gist of it, but it's just a little different. And you can have 8 people in your party, which is really great. And but you're also not sure if you're going to have people that come along in the game that they can join your party. There are actually those people, but they're not really too many of them. So you want to have your full 6 at the beginning. And you're not sure what weapons to have them specialize in, or attributes, or classes, or whatever. That takes a lot of getting used to as well, learning. And this is where Wizardry 8 gets into the area. So some gamers really love this kind of stuff. Figuring out your favorite classes and whatever, all that stuff. And it's where it really shines as a game. So this is a very Dungeons & Dragons type of game. At least for a lot of folks that play D&D really enjoy that part of the game. It really is that way. But it's a different system, of course, than D&D as far as character creation and stats and things. But it's similar in the extent to which it's very detailed. And so, I'm going to mention as few spoilers as possible. But that's basically my review so far. But yeah, you don't have to think very much outside the box. But there's a lot more combat than there are puzzles, and so it's a bit mindless at times, which is one of the downsides of the game, in my opinion. And also the scenery could use some variety, but it's not too bad that way. There's a lot of just, I know what it's very late 90s, 2000s, right now, kind of, basically right in the millennium kind of games, that era, you had a certain look to a lot of these games like that, and it very much has that look of a first-person sharp angle, or if you want grass, you want some greenery, you just have green flatness. And so trees are there's just not a lot of underbrush in a lot of places, it has its own aesthetic, which is nice, but it can feel a little bit like a vast expanse of flatness compared to the Elder Scrolls. If that's something that you don't like so much, just take that into account. But there are places that seem a bit more interesting visually, but to me, not that much. That was Wizardry 8. So let's get to my question here for you guys. So I have a friend of mine who's a bit younger, more naive than me in some respects. Depends on what you're talking about, I suppose. But he's younger, and he's, I don't know. He has his aspects to him which make it a little bit more tricky whether or not you, depending on your situation, depending on my situation in life, want to room with him. And there's financial considerations and to extent and where he wants to live. So he wants to move into this new place nearby where I live in a month, which is not very much time at all. And I recommended that he find some other folks before me, and that if a situation opens up in the future, I'll consider going in. But it's this is hard because, well, he's lived at home for a while, working on studying to work at Boeing, but now he has this other job that's lined up. They like how he's got some additional training of some sort. And this is all just so much of this moving in with someone else thing. There's a lot of things to try to consider. And he mentioned, though, that the place he's looking at is month by month, which is a huge thumbs up for me, because if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. I'm not locked into a yearly contract with something that's just kind of... So, and the place I'm at right now is fine. You know, there's all things that I want to do, and I like to have the freedom to do them, and without being locked into a yearly contract. And there's also a question of, again, how much is rent per month, and how much am I going to have to pay up front, and what else is going on financially, you know. And I don't know. It's just, what do you guys think? I mean, I'm sure you've had, some of you have been, whenever you move, or you can even consider moving, there's a lot to think about. I think I know what course I'm going to pursue, and I think someone else closer to his age and closer to his maturity level, that sort of thing, should room with him first. And if for some reason it's not working out too well, I'll consider moving in, but only when I know it's the right move for me. And of course, age is always relative. When I was younger, I was very mature, extremely mature in some respects, and just not as experienced in many respects in life skills, but I've gotten better over time, but there are things that I still mess up on. And, you know, I don't know very much about cars, for instance, and I don't know very much about certain other things that are very practical things that would be good to know about. But even that being the case, I've rented a lot. I understand very much what I would like to, where I like to live, and as time goes on, hopefully get more into the house situation, etc., marriage, that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, as far as, obviously, there's a certain type of neighborhood that I really despise. It's a type of neighborhood that forces you to obey certain rules and forces you to have your house look a certain way. It's the community thing. So yeah, I mean, I think you know what I'm talking about. If I see that description, or if I hear that description in the place I'm considering renting, that's just a no-go right there. I don't go for that crap, because it is very controlling. And the intent behind it is to have everybody get along with each other better, but it backfires, because instead of everybody getting along better with everybody's house being the same color and everybody obeying certain rules, that it works out well. Instead of that, it turns into some controlling crap, and you pay monthly dues. And no, I mean, I had a landlord that I found out was in this kind of neighborhood, but for various reasons, it didn't affect me as much personally. But there's some kind of wetland nearby that nobody ever used, but it's just this. It's the, by the way, regarding wetlands and streams and ponds and things, they always say the stream is in your care, kind of thing. How many of us actually go down to these wetlands and creeks and streams and ponds and either fish or walk around like a nature trail, or sometimes that's not even allowed? I mean, they're all fenced off. So what's the point? I mean, what's the point of saying something like that? The stream is in your care. It's just like, no, it isn't. It's in the care of whoever built the fence around it. And, some agency or something. I don't see those agencies as being bad. I just see them as being a little bit different than the sort of thing where you can just do what you want to, as long as you're not hurting anything in the environment. Anyway, that's a different subject. So, there's a lot of things to consider when you're moving. I'm just needing to sort this out a bit. I mean, one of the things I keep coming across are noise issues, or, different people have different things that bother them noise-wise. It's ever since I can remember, ever since leaving home for college, until now really, there's always been that question of, is this too loud? Is this going to bother someone? Nobody has a decibel reader. I mean, any rule that has to do with how loud you are being at certain times of day or night is going to be always hard to enforce. Unless you're clearly being too loud. But yeah, I mean, these noise things are always, they keep coming up. They keep... I'm going to turn around and head back, but they keep coming up again. They never go away until when someone gets a house and there's a lot of room around their house, And I've never been loud. It's just sometimes it comes down to things that someone's more sensitive about than others, and sometimes you don't find those things out until I don't know when. But it's also a question of how grumpy people get about different things. And I know I've been just as miffed or as irritated or angry or as whatever as I've been the perpetrator sometimes of being loud at times. But I don't do things on purpose to bother someone noise-wise. And it generally involves things that are pretty forgivable, I think. I think it's a good idea to have a lot of room around one's living area, by the way. And so apartments are just not very great. And I play a horn, and I have to be able to play, or rent out space at a studio to play. If I'm living in an apartment. It has to be that way. You can't just be a musician, live in an apartment, and then, unless you have soundproof walls. Or live in a studio that's designed for that kind of thing. Everybody's a musician or something, I don't know. So, wrapping this up a little bit, it's been kind of toasty the last few months here in Western Washington. I mean, it really has. I know you can say where I live, it's always 110 or 120, so I don't have anything to complain about. You can say that. But, I mean, I don't have air conditioning, and it's like the summer isn't long enough to get a swamp cooler. And so it's just, I'm up till pretty late at night just because it's more tolerable to be living when it's cooler. least livably cooler, and then you want to sleep when it's really hot. And if you get up, you're all groggy, and that's what happens. We don't have air conditioning in the summer, even in Washington. Again, you can call me Washington Wimp, that's okay. I know, I am. It's okay. You can bring it, it's okay. But it's just, you know, anyway, it's hard to, so I was on a vacation, of course, recently. If you're following my videos, you saw me just making some videos at my parents' cabin. It's hard to just deal with stuff on an ongoing basis. That's really annoying. And it's just a question of what it is. And some things maybe get more under your skin than other things. But it just never stops. And it keeps going. Even if something like heat, you know, I can bite my tongue. But, you know, it's like some people just don't get it. That, you know, there are these continual stressors on some people. And so when someone snaps, I come to the point where I'm like, I understand exactly how you feel. I'm sure there's something going on that I don't know about. But that's why you snapped. And unless you're, you know, unless I feel traumatized or something by somebody's temper outburst, which tends not to happen too much these days, I'm going to be very forgiving. But yeah, I mean, if someone is a jerk, well, they can't justify that behavior of being a jerk by anything that they see in someone else. It's a fault. And, you know, they just have to figure out how not to be a jerk. I mean, people won't want to be around them. And I'm keeping that very, very vague in terms of what I'm talking about specifically. But, you know, I mean, this particular person wants to talk about what not to do to keep things really nice and peaceful. They can talk about it. They can apologize. This person has apologized before. And this person is considerably older than I am. And, you know, I respect him. But, you know, it's contributing somewhat to the desire to move out again. I have roomed with this person before I'm talking about. So, that's that. That's factoring in there somewhere. Now, if I got my own place and just did my own thing, it's really hard to figure out sometimes what that would be, and there's a lot of things to consider. So, having someone else needing to move out of their parents' home or whatever is nice, because it kind of gets the ball rolling. And it's also nice that it's a month-by-month kind of commitment for me. So, I hate it when it's not very clear what to do, but I still feel like the best thing to do in this case is for him to find other folks, get the lowest price, lowest rental thing as possible, make sure it's month-by-month rental thing, because I don't want to be an old man when the rent thing is, my rent is up, or my contract is up. That's ridiculous. Unless you're really locked into something, you know you're going to be there for a long time. So I like that to be up to me. So, anyway, if you guys have any thoughts or comments, leave them below. Catch you guys later. Bye.